Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of our cook-alongs. If you haven't done this before, I'm going to try to go at a speed that everybody can keep up with me, but I apologize if I'm moving quicker than you. The first thing that we do in these cook-alongs is to talk about all the equipment and the ingredients that you need, just to make sure that everybody's got it. So we're going to be making a fall version of a tomatillo sauce with either chicken or pork. I'm going to be doing chicken tonight. And the ingredients that we need are the fresh tomatillos, of course. If yours have the husk on them, go ahead and peel that husk off now because we don't want that to be on there. I'm going to leave that one on there and come back and do that in just a second. We need a couple of big poblano peppers, a couple of apples. I've got some honey crisps here, 4 cloves of garlic, and a red onion. You need some kind of herb. I gave you a choice of 4 different things. I've got a whole big bunch of epazote here, but I've also got some fresh sage. You could use cilantro for this. You could use basil for this, would be good as well. I've got my boneless, skinless chicken thighs over here. I'm trying to make it something we can get through really easily. So that's why I've chosen this, or you'll have your pork tenderloins. Now, for the accompaniment that we're going to make to go with it, we're going to be working with white sweet potato. So I've got a couple of white sweet potatoes here. The crema, the Mexican crema, or you could use sour cream for that, some butter. Now, of course, we'll need a pan to cook those potatoes in, a skillet to finish this all in. But what you're looking at right here is a half sheet pan that I have covered with foil. That is not absolutely necessary at all. The foil will just make things a little bit easier when it comes to cleaning up. So this last of the tomatillos that's on here has the stickiest of the little husk on the outside of it. And you know, it's got such a sticky husk on it that I'm just going to rinse it off because it was really sticky there and not all of it came off. Now, our next thing that we're going to talk about for building this tray that's going to go, oh, I didn't say the most important thing. If you haven't turned your broiler on, you're a little bit behind. I've got my broiler on, I've had it on for a little bit, and the rack in the oven is at the very highest place. You could do this probably. No, I don't think you could get one of those, a half sheet pan in most kind of little small toaster like oven. So let's say oven, okay? So I'm gonna split my my poblanos in half. And I'm doing it in the way that they usually grow fairly flat. So you want to do it across that narrow side so that you have as much space as possible here to roast. This other one's going to be a little bit more awkward. You know, when I look at the poblanos in the farmer's market or in the Mexican grocery store, any grocery store, I always choose the ones that are the absolute flattest, because some of them will be kind of contorted looking, and those are super hard to roast. So I can get those guys all on there. And then I've got my 4 cloves of garlic with the peels still on them. I'm going to throw those onto the sheet as well. And next thing I'll do is the onion. So I've got, this is a sort of largish red onion. It weighs about 8 ounces. You'll notice that I always put weights on things because the truth of the matter is that good cooking is really all about proportion. So if I don't tell you what my proportion is, yours could come out really different than mine. Therefore, I always give you that. So for me, a large onion is 8 ounces, but I will say that the large onions have grown and grown and grown. Now you can get these jumbo onions that look bigger than softballs. Okay, I'm going to cut this into 4 slices, which will each one be about a ½ an inch in diameter. I'm cutting them across the equator, that part of it. And I'm going to lay those guys out because we're going to roast those with everything else. And now the last thing that we're going to work with here is the apple. I've got these Honey Crisps. Honey Crisps are pretty big. Cut them in quarters first. That'll be our first thing to do here. Maybe you have a special way that you like to work with apples. My preferred way that I've done since I was a kid is to hold a paring knife in my hand and go into the apple, cutting out the core like that, and then just come on the back side of it and start doing the peeling of the outside of it. And in this particular recipe, lots of times I think I want to leave peels on things because I think they give you a really nice flavor. And a lot of times I like the texture that they give. But in this case, for this particular dish, the peel would really be noticeable and it would not enhance anything about the experience. So I'm cutting all the peel off of it. I know some people have special devices that they use for doing the peeling of the apples, but I use a paring knife. Maybe you've never seen a paring knife that's quite like this one here. This is a bird's beak one, and they're inexpensive. This one is a really nice version of it. I got tired of running through the cheap ones, so I bought a nice bird's beak one. But this one is easy to actually put a nice edge on as well. So I know that some of you would probably be doing some of this stuff with a peeler, but that really slows me down. So I'm just using my knife for it. Okay, now we didn't talk much about the different kinds of apples that you could choose for a dish like this, but this one is Honey Crisps. You probably, like me, you've fallen in love with them. I really do love them. I hate the fact that I love them so much. And I was at the farmer's market on Sunday morning, and I was thinking about all these wonderful different varieties of apples, a lot of the heirloom apples and such like that. And so I was thinking about what other things I would recommend if you go to your farmer's market, if you live in an area that's an apple growing area. Northern Spies would be really good in something like this. But the Mutsus, the Fuji apples, those cultivars that come from Japan, those are really good in this. Anything that's going to hold its shape. So a lot of people would immediately go to the Granny Smith. Granny Smiths are certainly decent apples. They hold their shape. They've got nice acid. In this dish, we've got tomatillos, and they need a lot. They have a lot of acid, so we don't need a lot of acid for this. So I would choose something that's a little on the sweeter side than that. Okay, now I'm going to cut them into about 1/2-inch slices. So I'm going to say 3 or 4 per apple quarter here. Let's see, go this way. I think 3 is probably the right amount for these guys. But the Honey Crisp has got that. I know it's a fairly recent cultivar that came out of Minnesota, but it's just got such a beautiful sweet and tart balance to it there. Okay, now we're I hope I didn't blast through it too fast for you. Actually, being in a professional kitchen for most of my life, you learn how to take tasks that for lots of people would take a really long time and actually get them done much faster. It's just all a matter of just practice on those things. Okay, I think I'm about to get them all on here. I got a few pieces that I'm going to have to kind of throw into another section up here, but we can just do that. And so my idea was to make this sort of like those sheet pan things that are very popular right now. So this is my version of something where you're cooking lots of it, but not the chicken. We're going to finish it all in a pan. So we're going to roast all of this stuff, slide it right into your oven, and I'm going to set my timer. So I've got my rack at the very highest level there. Set it on the highest broil. And I'm going to set my timer here for 6 minutes. So it'll make a really loud sound so that I keep the sound on the timer like something that I cannot ignore. So that's what you'll be hearing. But that's my sort of normal thing because I get, you can imagine that I'm a guy that's always trying to do about 3 things at once. So if I don't have my timer set on something that's really, really loud there, then I will just ignore it. Now let's go over here to these guys. Let's do the rest of our prep here. So it's white sweet potatoes. Probably a lot of you have never even tackled white sweet potatoes. You think they're orange, and there's a few varieties of orange, some of which, like the Beauregards and such from the South, are very highly prized. They're not my favorites. My favorite's sort of this original sweet potato that comes out of Mexico, and thank goodness they're readily available. I don't know about where you live, but in Chicago, you can find these white sweet potatoes in almost every grocery store. Certainly places like a Whole Foods that has sort of specialty vegetables and such, but now you can find it at everyday grocery stores. And there's the purple variety, purple fleshed variety, and then there is the one that's sort of purple. I'm not sure I would call this very purple. It looks more red on the outside right now. So there's that variety of ones that are white on the inside. And our first things, and this I will say is something that I do with a peeler. You will see immediately that we are exposing that white flesh as we take this has kind of got a thin peel. Now, if you haven't had this before, hopefully I will awaken your tastes to my favorite sweet potato flavor. There's a word in Spanish when something is sort of like just too sweet. It's empalagoso. And that is what I think of the orange sweet potatoes. They're just almost too sweet for me. So this is going to give us a light, and I will say slightly floral flavor, but whatever I put white sweet potato in, I just absolutely love it. So we just have to peel it. I'm not a nit when I'm peeling stuff like this to get every little bit of it off. I don't think little bits of the skin are going to hurt us, but if we left all of the skin on, we'd have kind of a mess on our hands because we wouldn't be able to mash this. And we're going to make basically mashed potatoes, but with the white sweet potatoes. Okay, these guys I'll put into we have, I think I've shown this before, but we keep chickens, and the chickens are going to love this. They will eat this stuff up by tomorrow. Okay, so now we want to make, we want basically 1-inch pieces out of this. These are fairly hard, so I'm going to cut this one into 3 chunks like that, and then cut the chunks down the middle. And these don't have to be, want them too different. Why? Because the cooking, we want them to cook, in the cooking, we want them to cook at the same rate. Okay, there's one of them cut up. Let's see if I can get this one even more evenly done.
Chef Lady
Yes.
B7661 asks, could you use regular potatoes for this preparation?
If you use regular potatoes, potatoes for this preparation. You just are making mashed potatoes. But yeah, absolutely, you could make it. But I'm encouraging everybody to use my favorite of the potatoes. And there are, as we know, a lot of health benefits with sweet potatoes. But the interesting thing is that that orange sweet potato that we think of as the only sweet potato, that's a fairly new thing on the market. And I know you'll say, oh no, it's been here all my life, but I'm talking in terms of the history of sweet potatoes. Okay, so now I've got all of that done. I'm going to get some water in a pan here. I want to have enough so that I can cover the sweet potatoes by about an inch or so. And then I'll put that over a high heat and start bringing that to a boil. I think that should about do it there. I'm just going to put it at the back of the stove here. And okay. Now, salting the water. Remember that what you're doing is to try to make salty water so that some of the salt will get into the sweet potatoes. So it's not just a pinch of salt in this. If you put a small amount of salt in this water, you won't taste anything in the potatoes. So it actually has to be salty. I want it to come to a boil fairly quick, so I'm going to put the top on it there and leave it over high heat. And we will come back to this here. And that I am just right on time. So now we can look in this oven and see what we have. Beautiful. Okay, so here's what I'm looking at. I'm starting to get some color on these guys, but not quite enough. I'm getting a little bit of color over here. These are blistering nicely, but they're still not where I need them to be. I'm going to put them in, and most of this stuff I'm just going to roast on that first side. If they were really dark, I would say I would flip them all over, but that's my timing. Let's look at them again in another 6 minutes here. So I'm going to set that timer for another 6 minutes, and then we'll come back to them and look at them. We may take a peek even before that. So let's start talking about the browning of the chicken here. So I'm going to put our big skillet. I have a 12-inch skillet here. So let's talk about 12-inch skillets, because I know a lot of people would consider that to be the biggest skillet known to man, and it kind of is. I mean, you can get 14-inch skillets and 16-inch skillets, but that would only be for use in restaurants or something. But the reason I love 12-inch skillets, especially a cast iron 12-inch skillet, is because it allows you to keep everything spread out. Maybe you have browned some ground beef before, and you've got a pound of ground beef and you've got a 10-inch skillet. Well, what you end up with is just stewing the meat in there because you can't spread it out enough. If you were to brown a pound of ground beef in a 12-inch skillet like this, you could spread it all out so that you could get it nicely browned. Now, browned always equals flavor. What's that thing that's called the Maillard reaction? That's where you find all the flavor. And a lot of people ask, what's the difference between the way we cook in a restaurant and the way people cook at home? I always say heat is one of them, but in that heat part of it is like, I just set this over a high flame, and a lot of people would never do that. But I've got this over high flame, but I can also spread everything out so that I can get brown. So when I say heat is important, it's because it gives you that Maillard reaction. It gives you that browned flavor that we all consider really good. And a lot of people at home are just afraid of doing that, or they don't have a 12-inch skillet, a 12-inch cast iron skillet. They are not expensive. As cooking equipment goes, they're the best deal out there. I encourage you. Lodge makes one. Lots of people make one. But you can get the pre-seasoned ones. You just have to treat it well. Okay, I've had this one for 40 years now, and it's still my go-to thing. I love it. Now, I'm going to talk about the meat that I have chosen here, which is the boneless, skinless chicken thighs. Now, if you're one of those people that always says, no, it can only have chicken breast because it's leaner, I will give you the fact that it's leaner. It can be really good. I don't care for it unless it's been brined and then cooked perfectly, okay? Chicken thighs are very forgiving. They will allow you to be able to cook them a lot longer than you could a chicken breast, and they don't have to be brined to be really good. So I'm sprinkling some salt over these guys, and now I'm going to flip them over, kind of open them up. You can see where the bone was in them, and then sprinkle them with a little bit more salt here. Okay, now I'm going to just rinse my hands off here and start to brown them. You notice here that I'm using the technique that I like a lot, which is to heat my heavy pan first. And then I'm going to add the fat to it, olive oil, vegetable oil, fresh rendered pork lard, which will give you the richest and roundest flavor, or second to that would be to grab, here's some rendered bacon fat, because I always keep the bacon fat. And so I'm going to put enough of that fat into this pan to coat the bottom of it nice. I don't know if you keep bacon fat, but I love bacon, and so I always keep the fat. Now I'm going to turn it down because I've heated my pan up some. So now I've got enough to coat the bottom of the pan nicely here. And I'm going to start laying this seasoned chicken in there. You should hear the nice sizzle when it goes in. Nice.
So Kelly D wants to know if they're making pork tenderloin version, should they cut the pork tenderloin?
No, we're going to do pork tenderloin. Everything is the same, and just put your pork tenderloins into the pan at the same time. I'm sorry I didn't talk about that. I was just talking about exactly what I had in front of me. I'm sorry about that, but you will do the same thing here with your pork tenderloin. It will take about the same amount of time to brown it because you have less surface to work with here. But you can see that my 1.5 pounds of chicken thighs fits perfectly in a 12-inch skillet without doing any kind of cramming them in there. They just fit nicely in a single layer. Okay, so you would do the same thing with your pork tenderloin, just keep turning it as it browns, but it probably isn't browned yet. Okay, now I'm finished with my chicken touching here. So I'm going to peek into, well, that was my 6 minutes, okay. So let's look at what we've got here. Nice. Okay, I'm hoping that this is what you're getting too. Okay, do you see that nice browned and everything? Everything is gorgeously roasted here. And our poblanos are beautifully roasted. I'm going to slide this back over here and now let's look at what we've got underneath here. Let's see if we got browning going on. We do. Okay. You know, I'm going to let that, I want them a little bit browner than that. So I'm going to let these guys stay in here. We're going to let these cool until they're handleable. We've got some water boiling for our sweet potatoes. So dump them into the hot water. And then I'm going to put the top back on this, but partially covered, so that as it's boiling there, it doesn't boil over. That's what partially covered will give you in this situation. Okay, now we're ready to start turning that chicken, I'm sure now, or if you're working with the pork tenderloin, you'll be onto that as well. But let's see here what we've got color-wise now. A little bit darker. Beautiful. Ah, nice. Now, there is something that I learned very early on in my professional cooking career, and it might seem sort of like excessive to you, but it's something that I always do, which is to grab a rimmed baking sheet and I put a rack on the top of it. And I always I keep all my rimmed baking sheets and the racks just right here at easy access so that I can grab it. This kind of setup, most people would probably just do this on a plate, but when this is browned on both sides, then you put it on a plate. But if you put it on a rimmed baking sheet, what you'll find is that you'll have less of the juices going down on the baking sheet. You want those juices to stay in the meat. So you'll find less of them on the baking sheet, and the end product will turn out to be just so much juicier, okay? Do we have any general questions that anybody would like to ask while we're browning the other side of the chicken here?
We have a question about curing a cast iron skillet, cleaning a cast iron.
Cleaning, okay. That's easy to talk about. Curing is not hard anymore because most of the time you will find that they come cured, okay? In fact, I think it's hard to find one that is not cured these days. So when you get your cured one, the one thing that you have to keep in mind is that when you wash it out, and at the beginning you have to be kind of gentle with it. When I say gentle, don't scrub it hard. Some people say never put detergent in it. I would say after about the first 6 months or so, you can put detergent in it, okay? But during that first 6 months or so, you want to be very, very careful that you, as it is building up that beautiful surface, that you're not destroying it. So don't scrub it, don't put soap on it. What I always do is to dump some salt on it, take a paper towel and scrub it with the abrasiveness of the salt. And then rinse it out and always dry it over heat. I used this one to make dinner for my family last night, and I washed it out. Like I said, I've had this one for 40 years now, so it's got a really good patina on it. I washed it out, didn't dry it, set it over the burner, and dried it out completely there and hung it back on the wall where I keep this guy. Okay, we are done with that. I'm going to take this out. I know a lot of people have all kinds of admonitions about how you're supposed to work with cast iron. I don't think it's as difficult as people make it sound. I'm going to turn the fire off now underneath this and let this sit for a minute. We're going to make our sauce in there. The part that is stuck on the bottom of this pan, and you may see some on your pan, is called we use the words in French, or the word in French, F-O-N-D, fond. And it refers to all the little bits of browned chicken on the bottom here. That stuff is like gold. That's what's going to give this sauce such a beautiful, beautiful flavor. Okay, so I'm cooled off to a certain degree here. So let's do this. Let's peel the skin off of these guys. I don't know about yours. These are still pretty hot. But I'm going to make them cooler just by starting to peel the skin off of them. And then we'll flip them over in a minute here. And we will, let's see what that looks like. This is nicely roasted. So sometimes when I'm talking to everybody about how to roast poblanos, I say to roast them up under a broiler. But I usually am talking about the whole ones where you would have to go in and turn them a lot. Actually cutting them in half and putting on a rimmed baking sheet like this is a very easy way to roast them very evenly, and then you don't have to worry about flipping them around all the time and such. So that might be something. The other thing to keep in mind, especially at this time of year when the farmers markets are filled with so many great different kinds of chilies and peppers, is that you can fire up your grill and do the roasting on a grill where you've got a lot more space to spread everything out. I use that. And in fact, this last Sunday at the farmer's market, I bought a whole bunch of extra poblanos and then I roasted them all. And I don't know if you know this little trick, but you can put them all individually flat in a plastic bag and put them in your freezer. And that way, when you want a roasted poblano another time, I don't even peel them or anything, just pack them in there. And then once they're completely frozen, you can just fill the bag with the flattened ones you've done, or you could roast them. I mean, you could freeze them on a sheet pan or something like that. Okay, so we've got that part of it done. We're going to cut all of the apples up here. So I'm going to slide them all out here. And then we're going to cut up the roasted red onion, and we're going to cut up these poblanos.
Chef, there's a lot of chat in the chat about when to use bacon fat or lard. How would you decide?
Okay, number one, good lard is not easily accessible. Don't buy the stuff in the grocery store that's in the little rectangular containers, like the national brands and stuff like that. You want to get a good lard from a butcher or at a Mexican grocery store, but again, not the national brands, the stuff you would buy at the meat counter. We're very lucky that in our restaurant, we have the opportunity to buy lard from the guy that raises all the pigs for us. So it's beautifully rendered and it's fresh rendered. It's a really fresh product. It's not hydrogenated. That's the stuff to stay away from. If you can't find good lard like that, bacon dressings are your second choice there. And the bacon dressings have the added, let's say the added positive note of smokiness, which will be very, very welcome in something like this. But if you've got good lard, either the bacon drippings or the lard will give you the best looking brown, much better than browning in olive oil, say, or in vegetable oil. But all of those are good. So whatever it is that you're working with, that is going to turn out something that is really delicious. Now, the next thing that I'm doing here is to peel the roasted garlic. If your roasted garlic has spots in it that feel like they are really hard and black, don't worry much about that because they will get incorporated into the sauce because we're going to do this in a blender. You could easily do it in a food processor too. It'll take a little bit longer to get the right consistency out of it. but a food processor will work just fine in this situation. The thing is, in Mexico, everybody uses blenders. They don't really use food processors very much. And so that's one of the reasons that I do what I do, because it's just in keeping with what's going on there. Okay, so now the last thing is to put the tomatillos in here with, I'm going to pour all that juice in there. The juice is super delicious. Okay, so we'll get that in there. And then put the top on it. And we're going to make a nice blended sauce out of these things. I'm doing it about medium speed here. That's going to give me what I'm looking for. We're doing a very chunky sauce with a smooth background here. So the sauce now is going to go back into this pan, which hasn't cooled down very much. But I want to show you something here. I want to really concentrate the flavors of the tomatillo and the garlic, the roasted garlic here. So I've got my pan that's still kind of warm because it's a cast iron pan and it holds a lot of heat. But if I put that in there, it's just a weak kind of sizzle. So I don't want such a weak sizzle. I want a sharper sizzle so that all of this can just like cook down really quickly, concentrating the flavors and bringing up the sweetness, because we're actually going to brown this puree of the tomatillo. So let's see if it's going to give me a sharper sizzle there, a little bit sharper sizzle. I'm going to wait for another 30 seconds on this. I've got this over high heat. You might want, I'm going to start it over high, but I'm going to turn it down to medium high. But I often will start the pan over high heat just to heat it up really, really well. Okay, so now that all goes in there. And I'm going to use a wooden implement because that's what I like to work with against the bottom of this pan. You could use any kind of an implement, but wood feels better against the metal to me. And so I'm scooping up all the foam that's on the bottom of the pan here and mixing it in. And as you see, this is cooking down quickly. You're going to have to clean your stove at the end of this. I don't mind that because I like what I'm getting here, but we've browned that chicken and now we're cooking down this tomatillo base. Now, I'm going to stop doing the stirring for a minute while I come back over here to my vegetables and fruits that are going to go in here. I'm going to line up these pieces of apple and just cut them down the middle, because that's going to give me about 1/2 inch pieces. So like that. Let's do the same. There's a little bit of that onion skin on the outside of this piece. So I want to get rid of that exterior. You'll notice it right away. If you've got, it looks different than everything else. So I've got a little bit of that on there. And then for this, let's just cut them in quarters. I've stacked 2 of them up here. Yeah, those will be nice pieces to go in. This will all go into the sauce once we get it cooked down. Now, about the rest of this stuff here in the poblanos. I'm going to pull all of the seeds out of it, flipping it over, pull the seed pod off. I'm going to rinse that one because it's got too many seeds. Same thing with this one. I'm just going to pull the top of it off. There we go. And I think I'm going to just rinse these guys off very briefly. Now, I will tell you, when I say rinse them off, I don't mean anything more than just what you see me doing here, which is very, very quick. I'm not trying to get the roasted flavor off of them. I'm just getting the seeds off of them, basically. So I do that all very quickly, and we will cut these guys up into smaller pieces here. So I usually line them up like that. And again, we're looking for kind of 1/2-inch squares, so I'm going to cut down in 1/2-inch strips and then cut crosswise. Okay, let's go back to our sauce because it should be ready now. You can see that it has really, I think there's a timer going off. Okay, that means that we have 15 minutes on our sweet potatoes, but look at that. You see how it's now boiled down until it's thick like tomato paste? And it's really, really reduced, and it's darkened in color. And I'm going to pour in the 1 cup of chicken broth now. And this is the point at which I'll just turn everything down. Okay, so I'm going to turn our rear one off because I'm going to drain those guys and we'll finish our mash. But let's get everything back in the skillet here. Okay, so now we've got our poblanos. They're going to go in. Our roasted onions will be next. Look at that. I love the color of these roasted red onions, and they'll add a nice sweet counterpoint to the natural acidity of the tomatillo. And then, of course, you get the sweetness now of our roasted apple. And I'm going to stir all of that together. We have no salt in this at all yet, except a little bit of salt that would come from that stock or that broth that we put in here. So let's go to the salt now. So this will end up taking a little bit more than a teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to start with that. And then once we get it stirred in to it all, I'm going to nestle down in here the chicken thighs. Those should have cooled off completely by now as well. But let's just put them down in here. I'm turning it way down now to just like medium-low heat. Look how pretty that is. Couple stragglers there. And let's go back now to our sweet potato mash. So, okay. Yeah, just nestle them down in there so that they'll finish their cooking nicely. Okay. Now I'm going to take, just before I go to the sweet potato mash, I'm going to take just a second to clean up the board here because I've got all the remnants of chopping the roasted vegetables. So I want to get rid of all of that. I know a lot of people think of having like a maple cutting board sort of top to their countertop, and then they're just afraid to use it. Don't be. Maple cutting boards are really, I've had this one for 26 years here, and look at what it looks like. One time I sanded it But other than that one time, this is just what it looks like. And I cut on it constantly. So don't be afraid of cutting on a maple countertop like this. I know a lot of people think, oh, it's so pretty, I don't want to do anything to it. But it's a very, very, very hard wood, and it will take whatever you can give it. Okay, let's go top off. I'm going to use my top. You can pour this into a colander like I wrote in the recipe, or you can do this kind of a thing where you just pour the water off of it. Now we want to make sure these guys are soft. I got a fork over here, and I'll just put, yeah, they're very soft and just perfect now. A lot of times when I'm making mashed potatoes, this is the point at which I would leave the potatoes to let all of the steam escape. I'm not going to do that with this one. I'm going to take my butter, which has been sitting in a very hot place, so mostly it has melted now. And then I'm going to take the crema that I have, or as I said, you could use sour cream, and the sour cream is really good because these are sweet. So I gave myself a little more than the 1/3 cup here, because if I needed to add more at the end, I wanted to have it at ready access. And now on to the mashing. So you've seen me use this for making guacamole. You can also use it as a potato masher if you have never used it that way. I know that's the way it was originally designed, but I love mashed potatoes that are mashed with this because they have such a great texture. I like there to be some texture. If you're one of those people that likes the whipped potatoes, you won't get it with an old-fashioned potato masher. That you'll have to use a ricer, and you could easily use a ricer on this if you wanted them to be really smooth. But I like a little texture in it, so I'm going to use this and not do too much work on it. Think about this for your Thanksgiving table, maybe half this and half white potatoes. I like to throw in a parsnip too because I think they're really delicious. If you have little kids that only like mashed potatoes, this will be weird to them. But if you've got a whole lot of adults that want to have something different, the mashed white sweet potato might be it for your Thanksgiving table. You can see how easily they come together though, which is one of the things that I just absolutely love about them. Okay, a little taste. So they got a little salt, but they didn't get nearly enough salt. They are like regular potatoes. They want salt to bring out all of the flavors in them there. And I'm going to stir that in with a spoon that I can serve with. Let's see. I love this stuff, man. It's so good. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. Set that off to the side. This needs another minute or so to kind of cook along there. So while we're waiting for that to finish, I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about mezcal, because I know everybody's interested in mezcal these days. So I pulled out some things to talk about. Couple that you can easily find these days. This is one, I have two from Oaxaca here. Mezcal, everybody thinks about Oaxaca when they think about mezcal, but there are many more states that can actually make mezcal and bottle it under the name mezcal. I think we may be up to 14 different states now. But both of these are from Oaxaca, which is the most famous for that. This is an ensemble, which means that it's a field blend of different kinds. The most common of the agave varieties that is used to make mezcal will always be espadín. in Oaxaca. And this particular one, which is a special bottling of Vida Mezcal. Can you see it better that way? Vida Mezcal that was bottled just for Dia de Muertos. It comes up November 1st and 2nd. It's all espadín. This is a mixture of different kinds of agave. They don't say exactly which ones, but they call it an ensemble, meaning that it is bringing all of these flavors from the different parts of these different kinds of, not different parts of agave, but different kinds of agave. I just realized I missed something here. We didn't do an herb in here so this is the epazote, if you haven't seen that. So it's a jagged edged herb and it's pungent. It gets best flavored when it simmers with something for quite a while. People would put that much in a pot of beans and let it cook for a couple or 3 hours. What I'm going to use today is some fresh sage, which goes very well with apples and the chicken and the roasted onions. So I'm going to put this amount of sage in there that I just pulled out of our garden. If you haven't ever grown sage, it's actually very, very easy to grow. I'm going to cut it up by just cutting crosswise. Basically this thing that is called a chiffonade. So cutting crosswise very, very thinly. It's a great way to cut most herbs. And then when we've run out of all of our leaves there, I'm going to sprinkle this over. This will make a really nice flavor without having to cook as long as the epazote would. I would definitely make sure that that went in when we put in, before we put the chicken in. Okay, just nestle that down in there. Yeah, it's looking good. Okay, now. It's a little drier than I want now. The chicken should be done. I'm going to take just a little bit of water in it just to thin out the sauce just a little bit. You could put more chicken broth in there if you wanted it, but I will give you a warning that too much chicken broth, it will start to taste like chicken broth and you'll lose all those other wonderful flavors that are in there. When you are tasting mezcal, it is typical to use either the little, what they call a veladora, which is a little votive candle holder. That's very standard in Mexico. Or something that looks a little bit like this. Or maybe you've seen the caballitos, which are very tall and skinny. The caballitos are more associated with tequila than they are with mezcal. But this is probably the shape of the most standard vessel to taste mezcal with, and this is called a copita. This is a fancy copita that's made by an artist in Oaxaca that I think is really, really beautiful, but this would be the shape of that. Okay, so I'm going to start with Vida, which is very easy to find and a very affordable mezcal, and give that a little taste. Now, when you're tasting mezcal, a couple things to alert you to. First thing you probably want to do is rub it over your wrist area and smell it. All of the alcohol will evaporate super fast, and you can smell it and you can notice the roasted agave notes to it. If there's any smokiness to it, which most of the mezcals will have some smokiness, you will get that. Second thing to do is give one taste and don't think about it at all. Just let it coat your tongue and swallow it, but don't try to discern any flavors. That's priming the pump. Okay, that's going to give you the opportunity to, I'm not going to call it wet your whistle, but really let your palate open up. Second taste. Now I can taste it. Now I can get all those flavors. This is a medium smoky one, but super rich. Comes from San Juan del Rio in the mountains of Oaxaca. Really beautiful flavor that is easily accessible. Let's just call it that. Okay, now I'm going to go on to this ensemble. I would expect it to be slightly different because it's not all espadín. I'm going to go through the same standard practice. Oh, it's got more herbal elements that are already coming out on the nose. So I'm expecting something different. A little bit of priming the pump there. Lighter all around, more elegant. It's got herbal notes, floral notes, a little less aggressive in the smokiness of it, but something that is just really elegant and delicious. Also quite available, either the regular Montelobos or the Montelobos Ensemble, like we're doing there. Now, lots of people ask me, if you're going to make a Mezcal Margarita, how do you do it? If you make it like a regular margarita, you may love it or not love it, okay? It may be too overpowering because tequila is lighter in all of the flavors and tends to go sweeter than mezcal. So I set out a couple things. A brandy-based orange liqueur plus a little bit of brandy, or if you don't have regular brandy, you could use a little bit of bourbon or another whiskey. So if we're going to start with a couple ounces of mezcal, we'd put a half an ounce of a brandy-based, Grand Marnier is the most famous, brandy-based orange liqueur, and a half an ounce of some kind of whiskey or brandy. Put it in there. Then about an ounce, 3/4 of an ounce to an ounce of fresh squeezed lime juice. And here's the ringer. I love these Peychaud bitters in there. It balances against all of the richness of flavor that you find in the Montelobos or in the Vida Mezcal. Okay, time to serve, folks. So my potatoes are still hot here, and I'm just gonna put a nice scoop of them on our plate. Oh man, I love those things. I've already said that too many times, and so I apologize for that. But I do love the flavor of them. And then we'll take a piece of our chicken to go on here and a whole lot of the chunky sauce to spoon around it.
Chef, if you were using pork.
Yes. So what I like to do with the pork is to let it rest for a few minutes after we have finished the cooking, and then cut it on the bias. I just can't go without having some kind of a green thing here. So even though we didn't cook it with this beautiful epazote that I have, I think a few leaves of something green in there will finish that off very nicely. A very simple presentation, but it's one that I never tire of because, man, it's like having those potatoes against the tangy fruitiness of that sauce, and then our browned and braised chicken thigh, or if you have the whole pork tenderloin, you will take it out, put it on the cutting board. Like I said, it's always best to leave it sit for a couple of minutes to reabsorb the liquid that's sort of bouncing around in it, and then slice it. Now, I like to slice it on the bias. So if I have the tapering end to my left here, I would slice it this way on the bias so that I could shingle out 3 or 4 slices of the pork tenderloin on the top of that. This is a great thing to do with the pork tenderloin. So there you have it. Maybe you're going to make a Mezcal Margarita to go with it. And we will finish up with any more questions we might have.
There was a question about the technique for freezing peppers.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the freezing of the peppers, I'm just going to pull out a freezer bag here to show you what I meant. So what I usually do is to roast them And when I do a lot of them, I do them on my grill, like I said before. And when they get all blackened and blistered on the outside, I let them cool down. And then I just put them into the freezer bag. So I would just line them up in a single layer in here. And I could usually get about 8 poblanos in here. And then I would lay them into the freezer just like that. And then after they're frozen, you can open the bag up and you could break them apart, and then you could just fill this bag with them. You could do that with a couple of different bags and combine them all into one if you wanted to do it that way. The other way I've done it is to put a silicone baking pad on a half-size sheet pan like what we roasted on here, and then lay the roasted peppers on that. Put those into the freezer, if that will fit into your freezer, and then freeze them solid, and then combine them all into a freezer bag, and then you can just pull them out. Now, after they defrost, which won't take very long at all, you can slip that roasted skin right off of them, tear them open, pull out the seed pod, and then clean them up and use them. But I almost always have those in my freezer, because when I'm in a hurry and I want to make something delicious, I can always know that I have those roasted poblanos or any other kind of chili to work with there. More questions?
Yes, there was a question about the size difference in tomatillos and whether you perceive a flavor difference.
Yeah. That's a great question. What about these really big tomatillos that you find all the time? Size really matters here, and it's not the bigger the better. Okay, the bigger ones actually have the same amount of flavor, this is my honest opinion, as the medium-sized ones, just spread over more tomatillo. And unfortunately, that means that if you're weighing them, you're going to have less flavor coming out of those tomatillos. So I don't ever choose those really big ones. And the other thing that I will say is that the small ones that have the little purple blush on them are going to give you the most concentrated and most delicious flavor. No matter what you choose, it's going to be good. But if you want to go to great, choose the smaller ones. Thank you all. We have cooked our dinner here together in an hour, and I'm really grateful that everybody joined us today. I hope you learned something. I hope you're enthusiastic about making this perfectly fall version of a great tomatillo dish, something that is absolutely company worthy, but also something that is not going to take you all day in the kitchen. So thank you so much for joining me. We'll do another one of these before the end of the year. Thank you, and keep cooking.